So we start today thinking a little bit about what we leave behind. His stories we leave behind and her story that we leave behind. Paul reminds us in the 12th chapter of Hebrews this. He reminds us that therefore, since we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles us, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. It is said that Paul would go to the games and watch and be mindful of all those people who were in the stands cheering the runners on. That essentially that's what it's like for us with the people who have moved into life eternal. So, according to the Ecology Global Network, there is an estimated 55.3 million people who died this past year. That's about 152,000 people a day and roughly 6,300 people an hour. It's about 2 people a second. It's been said that you can't help but love someone once you've heard their stories, and chances are we don't know the stories of some 55 million people who died last year. But there are stories of those that we do know, people whom we love who have died. For today is a day for all the saints, not just some, but all the saints. Those who God granted life and breath and movement to, and those now who make up that great cloud of witnesses Paul talks about. As I pondered this amazing number of 55 million this past week, I was mindful of those stories that we know, right? I mean, we knew Burt Reynolds, and we knew Aretha Franklin and John McCain, and we know a bit about their stories. But there sure are an awful lot of those 55 million whose stories we don't know. People like Eugene Peterson. Now, if you recall, a few weeks ago, I mentioned that I've decided to use the Message translation of the Bible this next year because Eugene Peterson was in hospice. Well, he has since passed away. And it's interesting to me how his history, is an impact on my history, or her story. See, I was never much of a reader growing up, and that was because I had an undiagnosed disability that was eventually figured out, but still not gaining a love for reading around 3rd grade. In fact, I didn't even learn how to read until 4th grade. Had an impact on me, and it's not the first resource I go to in learning. When I went to seminary, I discovered that this was somewhat of a problem, particularly when it came to the Bible, because we were told you had to use a particular Bible. It was called the Oxford Study Bible, and it was really hard to read. I didn't really like it at all. And then in 1993, this book comes out called The Message. And this guy dedicated most of his career in rewriting the Bible into language that would work for the rest of us. And quite frankly, I think if it weren't for him, I'm not sure I would have made it. See, I would start with his translation and then move back to the Oxford and then look at the Hebrew and then look at the Greek. As I reflect on it, I may not be standing before you today if it were not for that man up there. See, there are lots of people who moved into life eternal that we have to think about their lives having an impact on our own. His story is, in fact, part of her story now. There's another guy, his name is Albert Lexie. You may have never heard his story, but Albert Lexie shines shoes at the University of Pittsburgh Children's Hospital in Pittsburgh for about 30 years. He died this past year at the age of 76, and what makes his story so remarkable is what he did with the money he earned while working at the children's hospital. See, he shined shoes. He shined shoes. He would leave his home twice a week at 5:30 a.m., ride the bus 2 hours into Pittsburgh, and then be singly focused on shining shoes. He only made about $10,000 a year doing this. But he took that $10,000 and he put it together over the years, and over the years was able to send more than $200,000 for underinsured and uninsured children to receive medical care at that hospital. The doctors did note that he had one thing on his mind when you walked in the hospital on those Tuesdays and Thursdays. He would look at your feet and you knew immediately you were going to be taking off your shoes and giving them to him to to shine. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, the building was filled with people who didn't have shoes on because they were waiting for Lexi to shine them. There's an amazing story, and his story is now part of the history of all of these kids who have been impacted by his love and his grace. Here's somebody else you may not know. Her name is Lily Mae Bradford. In 1951, Lily Mae Bradford of Montgomery, Alabama, was heading home from her job caring for disabled children. As she boarded her bus and paid for her ride plus transfer, she noticed that the driver punched the ticket in the wrong place. Worried that she would have to pay again later, money that she didn't have, she asked him to fix it. He refused, and he ordered her to the back of the bus. Again, she asked if he would fix the ticket, and again, he ordered her to the back of the bus. But Bradford didn't go to the back of the bus. Instead, she sat down at the front and was arrested for disorderly conduct. Now, keep in mind, this is 4 years before Rosa Parks' historical moment on that bus in Montgomery. But in some ways, Lily's story made way for Rosa's story, which has made for a way for many stories after. A story that perhaps until today you didn't know. How do we keep the memory of these 55 million people who have died in the past year alive? The only way is through the likes of you and me. To be mindful of how the people we love, the pets we love, how their lives have impacted our lives in some way, and how we can continue to keep their story and their love alive by sharing the goodness they shared with us. In a moment, you'll see the faces of those who have left us. And as you watch, consider how you can share their history, his story, her story, in the weeks to come. All the faces you see up there that you know. Not long before Eugene Peterson died, he had an opportunity to share in a video about what was important in his life. We're going to share it with you now, but as you watch, be mindful of what perhaps your video might say, or the loved ones who you honor today, what they might say.
What's been the best bits of living for you?
My marriage and my children. Yeah. All the rest could go to pot, and I think I'd still make it. Yeah, my marriage and my children. I guess what I want to say is I could never have done the message without knowing Hebrew and Greek as well as I did. And I could never have done the message without having a congregation for 20 years the way I did. A congregation of ordinary people, working class people, middle class people. So the combination was synergistic, and I was given the basic materials that I was able to work with. I didn't think I was doing something that extraordinary, but I knew I was doing something for my congregation that was extraordinary. They were listening to this for the first time, as if for the first time.
How many books have you written?
35, not including the message.
Why do you not include the message?
Because it's not my book. Really. It's just, I don't think of it as, it's not my book.
What would be the characteristics of a saint?
Humility, Number one, unpretentiousness, having no idea that they're a saint.
Thanks, you guys. In John's Gospel, Jesus tells us about this place he's going to make for us. It's in John 14, and it goes like this. He says, "Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go and prepare a place for you? And when I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also." Those are wonderful words, but the truth is oftentimes our houses and our lives feel pretty empty when we lose somebody. I'm comforted in knowing that my loved one is someplace else, but that doesn't fix the empty room and the empty space in my life. It is very difficult to lose someone you love. It brings with it feelings and emotions that, well, we would rather not have. But that, my friends, is the risk of loving. It leaves a hole in your heart when you lose somebody you love. Jesus understood this hole in the heart and this love thing. In fact, there are 2 verses in the Bible. They're very short, but in some ways they capture this cycle. One says, God is love. That's John. And then in another text, we know that when Jesus lost a good friend, Jesus wept. So with love, a God of love, there is often weeping. You know, there's this myth, isn't it? There's this myth that somehow we are people who are supposed to be happy all the time. In fact, there are songs about it. We're supposed to get over things and get on with things. But sometimes, friends, the only response to life is grief. The only response is to grieve our losses. This includes not only the grief for those who have died, but for those disappointments we experience, the suffering in the world. Whether you like it or not, grief is essential to your health. If you never grieve over anything, well, that means one of 3 things. First, you're out of touch with reality. You're out of touch with your own emotions, or you don't love. Because when you love and you see sad things, that makes us grieve and leaves that hole in our heart. Grief is indeed a painful emotion, but it's healthy. It's healthy and it's a helpful emotion. It's God's gift to us. It's the tool that God gives us to get through the transitions of life. Now, some of you were hurt many years ago, probably growing up. Maybe your parents divorced. Maybe you were abused. Maybe you were hurt by something someone said to you. But the truth about life is we as children oftentimes don't know how to grieve because we haven't witnessed our parents or others grieving. So what happens to all of those losses? They just get pushed down a little deeper inside. And well, we all know what happens then. See, you need to go back and grieve those things. You need to grieve over things. Why? Because if you don't grieve, you get stuck, and you get stuck emotionally, and you will spend the rest of your life reacting to something that happened long ago and taking it out on the people around you. It simply is unhealthy. Friends, bad things that happen are not our choice. Bad things happen. And we don't have a choice in that. But we do have a choice to grieve. You can say, I don't like feeling sad, but I'm willing to feel sad. See, because the truth about life is that not everything that's helpful and healthy always feels good. You've got to let yourself mourn your losses and the losses of life, so that you can move on in life. Grief is indeed a blessing from God. It's a gift that we simply just have to claim. And the way we do that is we name and claim that which we cannot bear. The love we have for someone who has died, the loss of a relationship, the loss of a childhood, so many losses. Today, as you come to this place, consider what you have failed to grieve in your life, how it's affected you emotionally, spiritually, perhaps even physically. How can you continue through the process of grief and realize not everything in life feels good? What does it look like to allow yourself to grieve? And not only that, but to allow others around you to grieve. Today, as we come together, let's be mindful that big girls and big boys do cry. And that in doing so, we don't go around, but we go right through grief and experience the gift of love from God.
The roses aren't as pretty, the sun isn't quite as high, the birds don't sing as sweet of a lullaby, the stars seem a little bit faded, the clouds just a little more gray, and it feels like things won't ever be the same. Heaven got another angel tonight. You left this world behind. Heaven got a little better the day it took you away from me. I'm missing you tonight. I'll see you again sometime. Now I'll close my eyes and dream of heaven tonight. The beaches aren't as lovely, the sky isn't quite as blue, still they're sweetened by the memory of you. Rain is a little bit colder, the fire is never quite as warm. Still it seems that heaven isn't all that far. Heaven got another angel tonight. You left this world behind. Heaven got a little better the day it took you away from me. I'm missing you tonight. I'll see you again sometime. For now I'll close my eyes and dream of heaven tonight. Spending a little more time now with the things that mean a little bit more. I'm noticing the wonders of this world. I love with a little more hope now. I live with a little more peace, 'cause I understand how precious life can be. Oh, heaven got another angel tonight. You left this world behind. Heaven got a little better the day took you away from me. I'm missing you tonight. I'll see you again sometime.
I sang that song when my brother passed away because he always had the kind of spirit where he was living in such a way that he thought he had a lot more lives. He lived each day to the fullest. Another person who lived each day to the fullest is Ted Bradfield. Ted Bradfield, when he passed away, when he arrived in that place, he could say, well, the day I died, I ushered at my church, and the week before I stood right here and I said a prayer and I shared in a prayer with my congregation. I am reminded today that each day is a gift to each and every one of us. It's an opportunity for us to be mindful that the thin veil between this life and the next life is, well, very thin. And each day is a gift. And each day is an opportunity to live each day to the fullest. Today we celebrate those who are no longer with us, all the saints. But in a way, we're all seeking that path of sainthood with each moment and with each breath. As were the 6,000 people who died while we have gathered here today. May we live our lives in such a way that each breath, each movement, each step transforms this world with love. May we live in such a way that the light of God shines from within us and transforms this world. What are saints? They're people who function with humility, with grace, and with love. In a moment, you're going to have an opportunity to remember your loved ones by bringing forth a candle. I will be here. I think Jan will be up here as well. If you wish to name your folks who have passed, have a brief prayer, whatever it is you need, we are here for you. But as you light this candle, give thanks for those who have moved into life eternal. And then as you head back to your seat, be mindful, how are you called to live life each and every day? Will you pray with me? God of grace and love, to you we give thanks for all the saints that surround us. We give you thanks that you blessed our lives with history and her story. Give us the courage to take the love that has been shared with us and take it into the world. Give us the courage to love boldly, to grieve wholeheartedly, and to keep the goodness that has been blessed with that we have been blessed with others. May we be loving, caring saints. Amen.